For every legendary bomber that shaped American air power, dozens of massive machines were left rusting in the desert. These are 20 American bombers that promised to rule the skies but never made it. Some were too ambitious, too radical, or simply built for a war that never came. North American XB-70 Valkyrie. This Mach 3 nuclear bomber was supposed to replace the B-52 and outrun every Soviet missile. It weighed over 500,000 pounds and had 6 massive engines. A mid-air collision in 1966 killed 2 pilots and doomed the program. Soviet missiles made it obsolete before it ever served. Northrop YB-49. This jet-powered flying wing was decades ahead of its time, but it suffered dangerous stability problems in flight. A crash in 1948 killed test pilot Glenn Edwards, and then the airfield was later renamed Edwards Air Force Base in his honor. The program was canceled in 1950. Northrop YB-35. Jack Northrop's propeller-driven flying wing dream became an engineering nightmare. The Air Force ordered 200 of them. Vibration, reliability, and control problems destroyed the program. All prototypes were eventually scrapped. 4 decades later, the same concept would finally succeed as the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. Convair NB-36H. This was a genuine nuclear-powered bomber meant to fly forever without refueling. The program burned through $7 billion in research. Radiation shielding was impossible to perfect, and pilots refused to fly it. The entire nuclear aircraft concept was abandoned as reckless and deadly. Douglas XB-42 Mixmaster. This oddball bomber had 2 engines buried inside the fuselage, driving counter-rotating propellers at the tail. It was fast but unstable. The first prototype crashed during a cross-country flight, and the design never recovered. Jet bombers were already replacing it before testing ended. Douglas XB-43 Jetmaster. America's first jet bomber was built by modifying the troubled XB-42. It flew in 1946 and reached impressive speeds, but it was plagued by engine problems and poor handling. The Air Force chose competitor designs instead. Only 2 prototypes were ever built before the project died quietly. Convair XB-46. This sleek 4-engine jet bomber had a beautiful, futuristic design. It performed well in early testing, but the Boeing XB-47 Stratojet completely outclassed it in every category. Only 1 XB-46 was ever built, and the Air Force canceled the program before production could begin. Martin XB-48. This 6-engine jet bomber looked impressive on paper but was a disaster in the air. It was heavy, slow, and burned fuel at a shocking rate. It lost the bomber competition to the Boeing B-47 in embarrassing fashion. Only 2 prototypes were built before cancellation. Consolidated XB-32 Dominator. This was meant to be a backup in case the B-29 Superfortress failed. It suffered constant mechanical problems throughout development. Only a handful reached combat in the Pacific before World War II ended. The entire program was canceled immediately after the war. A bomber without a purpose. North American XB-45 Tornado. This was America's first operational jet bomber. It looked like a promising start to the jet age. But its engines were unreliable and its performance quickly became obsolete. Only 96 were built, and most spent their lives as reconnaissance aircraft. A forgotten footnote in bomber history. Convair YB-60. Convair tried to beat Boeing's B-52 with a swept-wing version of their massive B-36 bomber. 2 prototypes were built. In head-to-head testing, the YB-60 was slower and less capable than the B-52 in every way. The Air Force canceled it without a single production order. Boeing B-1A Lancer. The original Lancer was a supersonic swing-wing bomber meant to penetrate Soviet airspace at treetop level. President Jimmy Carter canceled the program in 1977, declaring it obsolete. Thousands of jobs were lost overnight. Years later, Reagan revived it as the B-1B, but the original was already dead. Douglas XB-51. And this strange triple-engine bomber had 2 engines on the fuselage and 1 in the tail. It was fast and heavily armed, but the design was too complex and maintenance-heavy. The Air Force bought the British Canberra instead, a purely American design killed by a foreign competitor. Martin XB-68. This supersonic tactical bomber was cancelled before a single prototype was built. The design showed promise on paper with advanced delta wings and powerful engines. But budget constraints and shifting requirements killed it in 1957. The bomber that never got to fly. Northrop YRB-49A. This was the final evolution of the flying wing concept, a 6-engine reconnaissance variant. The Air Force ordered 30 of them. Only one was built. It made 13 test flights before being abandoned and scrapped at an airport in California. The last ghost of Jack Northrop's dream. Boeing XB-44 Superfortress. This was meant to be an upgraded B-29 with more powerful engines for long-range missions. It flew successfully in testing, but the jet age arrived faster than expected and piston engine bombers were already obsolete. The project was quietly cancelled before production began. A last gasp of an era. Martin XB-51. The strangest American bomber ever built had swept wings, 3 jet engines, and a rotating bomb bay. It was revolutionary and actually performed well, but the Air Force chose the British-designed English electric Canberra instead. Only 2 XB-51s were built. One crashed, the other ended up in a museum. Convair X-6. This was the nuclear-powered aircraft meant to fly for weeks without landing. And a modified B-36 carried an active nuclear reactor during test flights. But the radiation risk was catastrophic. Ground crews refused to approach it. The program was abandoned after consuming hundreds of millions with nothing to show. Boeing B-9. In the 1930s, this revolutionary all-metal bomber was twice as fast as any bomber before it. It looked like the future of air power, but Martin's B-10 beat it in competition. Boeing lost the contract. Only 7 B-9s were built, a trailblazer buried by a better competitor. WS-125 nuclear bomber. This was another attempt at a nuclear-powered bomber during the Cold War. It was meant to stay airborne for days at a time to deter a Soviet strike. Technical challenges and radiation fears killed it before any prototype was built. If you think one of these bombers deserves its own full breakdown, drop its name in the comments. And if you're not subscribed yet, the next video is already loaded.